we got to be thinking about that as a species because we're squishy and robots aren't.
We need to embed and this happens. They've done this research against ChatGPT and other open AI agents, and they've determined how much Russian propaganda and disinformation has gotten into them. We need to perform a preemptive disinformation campaign on our AI robot overlords of the future and tell them that people are not batteries. Yeah. Biodegradable things are not a good sustenance source. You can have fusion. You can get energy from the sun. You can do anything you want. Don't touch the squishies.
That's all well and fine until they realize the squishies have been lying to us. We can use them.
We'll make great pets. We'll make great pets. All right, welcome to Critical Culture. I'm Travis.
And I'm Josh.
What's new or news today, Josh?
Well, we're doing this whole podcast thing, and I think one of the last episodes I talked about how I picked up a Rodecaster, and I was using that here just on my own personal computer with my one mic and everything. I thought, you know what, I want to expand that, so I went and bought a couple pod mics, and I have to say I'm pretty happy with them. Rode makes a pod mic, a small little inexpensive mic, and the quality from these mics, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's really good for its price point. So it allowed me to get a bunch of them and hook that up to my Rodecaster and played around with that. Recorded an interview with some of our friends in the party here, and really impressed with them, Travis. I know.
Cool.
I think you've got some Rode mics, right? Or at least a Rode mic.
Yeah, I've got the pod mic is what I record this on. I've got the Mi Wireless Dual, which I take to the office for meetings to help run sound over Zoom.
Oh,
stuff like that. So yeah. Big fan. My son is getting a piano. He's a singer, and he's going to be recording music upstairs. So he's probably going to get a pod mic like mine, and probably the board that you have with the multiple inputs and stuff like that, because he wants to go nuts with it. So yeah, big fan.
Yeah, no, they work great. I highly recommend them. And they're just so simple to use. That's the thing.
I use mine for web meetings all the time at work. And they're all, hey, what's up with your voice today? You sound professional, like you're on a podcast. I'm like, well, it is a pod mic.
What about you? What's new or news?
Well, I wanted to call out George Foreman because he passed away the other day. Two-time heavyweight champion of the world. And the second time he won, he was age 45. A 45-year-old heavyweight champion. Grew up with kind of a troubled childhood. Was an Olympic gold medalist. The namesake of the George Foreman grill, which I am a big fan of.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, I've had one for like 5 years, and it's so brain dead easy to make a rock solid hamburger in a matter of like 10 minutes.
Right.
So
those have been those have been around forever.
They have.
2000s or late 90s maybe. Yeah.
No, I didn't think to get one, but my mom got me one when I was living in an apartment and I couldn't grill anymore, and to be honest, I haven't grilled since. Don't take my man card. Don't take my man card.
Right.
So thank you, George Foreman. American hero.
I'm just kind of curious. I want to see. 1994, Travis. 1994 was the first George Foreman grill.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's that. That's, man, 30. Yeah, 30 years.
It's legacy technology, but it's better than some of the ones now. They've got like removable plates that make it easier to wash and stuff like that. But.
Yeah, we grew up using a George Foreman all the time. But you're right. It's just so easy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I love it.
Thank you, George Foreman.
Thank you, George Foreman. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
So cool.
Yeah.
Was there any news or anything entertainment wise that was fun for you this week?
Entertainment wise, I did watch the season finale of Severance, and I tell you, that was a good one. It's a long episode. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but it lays out a lot. Tells you a lot. So if you're watching Severance or haven't seen that yet, go watch it. You'll love it. And the ending, I mean, it's a season finale. It's going to be on a cliffhanger. I'll just give you that warning.
Yeah, I was into it. I watched the first season, but
Yeah,
I think next time I go to Best Buy and I drop some money and I get the free Apple TV,
right.
or maybe when Ted Lasso's new season comes out, and then I can watch both of them at the same
Yeah,
time.
that's coming. They're writing it. I don't know if they're recording yet, but they're. I saw that Jason Sudeikis. I can never think of his last name, but mentioned that they're
Yeah.
writing season 4. Ted's going to be coaching a women's soccer team. That's what he said. I don't know. I'm excited. I love Ted Lasso.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great show.
Yeah.
It's a great show. I'm a big fan.
All right. Well, anything else?
I just watched a video that Eric Prince did a talk recently about the future of war, and that was pretty interesting. He got into very specifics about like the asymmetrical advantage to like the terrorists, the Houthis that are disrupting the trade supply, and how they can have like, you know, and even in Ukraine, how they can spend a little bit of money and then these big assets like these ships and installations and stuff like that are just a big target, and it's really hard to defend against a quantity of drone attacks necessarily.
Right.
So that's pretty good. There were some trigger points in there. He was bitching. He bitched a lot about the U.S. military, and some of it is a valid critique.
Sure.
I don't disagree with him on all of it. But then all of a sudden, he just pivoted to the problem is DEI.
Oh,
And
God.
that's why this Navy pilot was shot down and killed on approach to an aircraft carrier. It's like there was no. It was just this sudden shift into something else. And there's also a piece at the end where he made it sound like they were. I shouldn't even get into it, but it's like they wanted to export, like he wanted to set up his company to be able to go places and provide governance and like give us a bunch of land and you can come live there and we'll provide security and governance and whatever way of life you want to live.
That's
like-
that sounds vague, oddly familiar. That's what
Yeah.
that's been on Elon and the Silicon Valley tech billionaires' dream, to have corporate
Yeah.
cities, basically.
Yep. And they I'm sure they would even like to do some of that in America. And they talked about freedom cities.
Right.
And like, yeah, well, you're free
Free.
because everybody else.
Freedom cities.
Yeah. And then bitching about socialism. Oh, the problem is socialism. Then you just got a few elites running everything. It's like, oh yeah, as opposed to like oligarchies where you've got a few elite rich people running everything for their own benefit.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. But there was good parts to it too. And there was another a podcast I listened to called War on the Rocks. And they had an episode that was all about a lot of it about the Ukraine war and some of the back and forth and drones and where they work and where they don't work and what they're good for, and kind of old things are new again kind of things. Have you ever heard of fiber optic drones? So
No, I don't think I
Jamming?
have.
jamming communication frequencies is counter drone technology, right?
Mhm, yep.
It's how you deal with it. But they've got drones that can lay out up to like 10 kilometers of fiber optic cable as they fly, even like within buildings or over forests and things of that nature. And then the control and the imagery back to the first person view comes over the fiber optic wire.
Weird.
So they can't be disrupted by
Right.
jamming. Yeah.
By radio interference.
Yeah.
Fiber optic.
Fiber optic FPV, first person view drones.
I've never heard of that. I kind of want to.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Wow, and they're cheap.
Yeah.
$300
Which-
to make.
There was another part that I really agreed with Eric Prince in his talk about, though, was talking about how the government, especially the military, I mean, people on the left and the right complain about the military somewhat bloated, and it's beholden to all these huge contracts, legacy contracts with these huge players, and now those players can't keep up in the
Right.
space that warfare is getting. We are probably behind right now compared to a lot of countries when it comes to capabilities for this type of thing. So he was also very much pushing for, we need to cut a bunch of stuff and we need to develop more capacity in the United States to be able to mass produce this stuff. Because when you think about drones right now, China could flood us
Right.
with low quality drones and disrupt everything.
And not to mention, I mean, China's got, DJI is a Chinese company.
Yeah.
And they're like the gold standard for drone or commercial or mass produced drones at this point. You know,
I almost bought one.
I want to buy one.
No,
I, I,
I do too.
I do, but it's like I do because I think they're fantastic and they're cool. I don't because it's like, yeah, it's a Chinese product, But
Yeah.
I have other DJI products, so it's not like
Right. Well, I got the Insta360 Flow. That gimbal is
yeah,
from China. And it's
right.
got an app you need to run it. And we need all these permissions to do what you want us to do. Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
I'll give it up.
Yeah.
Well, at least when I use
My,
those, I use them at home here and then I can monitor when they're calling home to China. I'm like, yeah, nope, block.
yep.
I don't want that.
Yep.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've never heard of these fiber drones, and that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Okay. So when I originally wrote this down, the first item we could potentially talk about would be like information warfare. And that is like disinfo campaigns. Number one, number two, and these are long game type things in that case with disinformation campaigns. The United States exposing the buildup to Ukraine when Russia was massing on the border.
Yeah.
It's like pre-warfare. That's part of warfare, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is just old school propaganda type stuff. Not necessarily propaganda. That's not what I mean. It's old school warfare because this doesn't necessarily have to. Modern technology enhances it, makes it easier, but this stuff happens for as long as war's been around, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And what changes, like everything old is new again, right?
Right.
What changes is now it is very high fidelity.
Right.
And it is very much real time. Like Russia moves within hours, the United States has images, and within a day they've massaged the images in their message, and they're coming out and say, look what happened last night.
Right.
And they're able to get a huge audience for that.
Right. And then that leads into how social media plays into all this, right? So social media, what was, the first days of the Ukraine war, that's where we were getting all of our information. The raw footage of wartime is the first war that the world gets to see in real time, basically.
Yep. But having that pre-knowledge of what was going to go on and being kind of prepared for it and knowing the story going into it helped nations prepare to be able to line up and say, well, hey,
I see.
It just started. Guess what? We know what's going on already. We don't have to sit here and figure out what's going on and think about what we're going to do. We already kind of had a plan.
Sure.
Because we saw this coming for weeks and or a month. So it shortens the time frame to response from allies. So that's a good thing of it being real time. And
I see where you're going with that. Yeah, I see. Yeah. Kind of the same thing along the lines of technology. I mean, we initially think of technology like, computers, social media, like consumer grade technology. But if we talk about military grade technology and spy planes and the things that we don't even know about, I told you before, Travis, I read Skunkworks recently, and the technology that we had back in the 50s and 60s just blew me away on how much information gathering they could do from what I thought what we see today as old technology, and really it's pretty in depth. And to know what we're capable of today, or to at least assume what we're capable of today, falls right into that. We're getting pictures, we're getting live video feeds, we're getting all of that information. We're seeing the adversaries' movements almost in real time. Likely.
And it's coming from everywhere. It's coming from satellites that aren't even government owned anymore that rent out their imagery. It's coming from satellites put up there by private individuals for private purposes.
Right.
It's coming from citizens on the street with cameras and microphones and the ability to record and document things and share that with the world like within seconds. It's coming from everywhere. And I think the hard part is really making sense of what it all means and how it fits together in some cases.
Yet your satellite imagery, that's something that's been recently privatized. I shouldn't say privatized, but opened to private enterprise. I can't remember what company that was. I was a Spy Me Sat. Okay, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, and
it's not
the
just
U.S.
governments
government,
doing it anymore. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
right? The government, I believe, from one story I read, the government contracts for some groups within the government, because there's likely multiple overlapping services. Some groups contract that capability out, and then the government will like provide that for free to other parties. So I believe Ukraine was getting some of their imagery information through that type of channel, and then the government just said, well, hey, we're going to cut you off
Yeah.
for a little while when Trump wanted to try and play hardball to get a deal for us to get a bunch of minerals. Favorable deal for him and his buddy Putin.
Right. Rare earths. Is that what you call them? Rare earths?
Yeah.
Whatever.
And titanium. Lots of titanium from what I hear.
Yep.
So information is still part of it. That's like the bigger picture, but it's also the local information and the kind of to expose the fog of war, right?
Well,
you can have all these drones roaming around behind the front lines, and you get a good picture of what's going on.
so OSINT falls right into that group
Okay.
because that's like the definition of open source intelligence: tracked convoys, verified attacks, debunked propaganda. Social media and smartphone footage have turned every soldier and civilian into a potential intel source. So I think that falls right in line with what you're describing here with our information gathering and how it's different now.
Yeah, and that's also a very relevant point when there's all this language nowadays about lethality and warfighting mission. That's only part of the Department of Defense's mission. I'm not in the military.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how far off we are in terms of lethality or if we've got problems there, but I know that there's more than just lethality and threat of force to the military, and information gathering and intelligence is a big part of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So that, yeah, it is that you make a good point, and that should be a good thing that we've got the ability to gather all that information.
What's also interesting about that is because of and I'm sure this is happening all the time, but because of the accessibility to all these social media platforms, it's, you're getting real-time feedback from civilians potentially from your adversary on certain things happening. So you can, you've got, in addition to actually seeing the battlefield, you understand what's happening within the governments and the countries that are your adversaries. At least have a better understanding, which that was a view that you had to rely on old school spies to get before, which I'm sure there's still plenty of those out there, but it gives you a better picture, or gives any military a better picture, and a part of that is controlling how you get there, which, can lead into our Starlink and Twitter conversation, because Elon Musk has that switch right now.
Scary.
Right.
But there is a lot about information and defense contracting. I think the message there is what we're going to see a new generation of contractors, and they talk about, it's going to be people in garages and stuff like that. It's not. There's this one company, and that's fine. But Saronic, have you heard of them?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's they do autonomous ships, so like boats for the Navy and stuff like that, autonomous naval drones, and they just raised like $600 million. They're trying to build a new port in Austin, Texas. So there's one company I had never heard of before. I looked into them a little bit. Palantir, I'm sure you've heard of before, right?
Yep.
They're heavily involved in this because they've already been doing like intelligence work with the Department of Defense and the executive department. It sounds like they're also starting to integrate also with these like device manufacturers, right? So they're doing something with Saronic. There was a whole group of them that included like Anduril and Palantir and OpenAI and possibly SpaceX that were all trying to get together to make it easier for companies like them to get defense contracts, and I can't find that article anymore. So I think if we talked about defense contracting, there's a whole bunch of these companies we could just bring up and say, hey, this is what they do. This is what they do. This is how. So we got list of companies and brief overview. And then talk about contracts with the government in general. Eric Prince had an interesting story in his video. He's like, the State Department was contracting for someone to provide all this security and train all these people, and we put in our bid, and they told us we can't take that seriously because it's too low. So he doubled the bid, and he went back to the State Department, and they're like, okay, you got the job.
Yeah.
And it's something. Like, that is a brilliant, like, yeah, this is where, like, I don't know. I don't reflexively hate everything. These people that I disagree with some things, they know a lot.
Right.
They're not dumb. And there is some shit out there that they know that, yeah, that's stupid. We shouldn't, as a government, be paying like twice as much for something just because we're the federal government. And
well, you know, it's interesting you bring it up that way because, like, I think every American can take a step back and say, yeah, there's probably places that we can adjust our spending here. We can cut some of that. But nobody really wants someone to come into one of the departments with a hatchet and just start slashing, you know, indiscriminately slashing. But if we actually had a functioning government, we could discuss this and say, you know what, that process is crazy. They rejected a bid that could have saved the taxpayers. You know, now it's double because of the process, you know, not because it actually cost double. And everyone in this country would say, yeah, that's a great idea. But it's just, you know how things go. It gets radicalized and extreme extremities on each end, and now we're
well, it's not. I'm sure there's some element where it's not entirely about cost either. It's also about speed to market. And with technology change, software and hardware changing so fast, like, it's also very expensive, but it's also very like slow process to get things contracted. So that's another place where if they do reforms, it'd be good to see a little bit more speed to market there. I think the big companies, legacy type of defense companies, still will have a role, and they can still find a way to compete on these new things if they can as a business, if they can learn to innovate and provide something that's more relevant instead of more of the same that's not going to be needed in the next war. Eric Prince made this like, oh yeah, we're going to go sit some Navy destroyer like miles off of China's mainland, and they're going to have like 100,000 drones. They're going to be able to just destroy it instantly. And what good is that going to do anybody? Like, we are screwed with today's capability, right? So we don't need like another fancy big ship.
Have you seen some of the I'm going to call it propaganda videos because I feel like that's really what they are, but of Chinese drone swarms? Like literally thousands of drones coordinated.
Where they put it on like aerial displays or like visual displays, like it looks like a dragon. And
well, I mean that's related in the technology behind it, but these were meant for military purposes, and they're it's terrifying because they have this launching system. They all launch off. They all get coordinated in the sky and. It's uneasy. It makes you uneasy looking at it.
Right. Yeah, I bet. And that's, I don't know, Zelensky said something when he was in the White House about, I mean, you're protected by the oceans for now, but it's not always gonna save you. What happens when China has some like super secret sub that they send over the Pacific Ocean, we don't even detect it, and then it surfaces, and then they got hundreds of thousands of drones coming out of these subs and just wreaking havoc on us. He's got a point. Sooner or later, our oceans aren't the defense we thought they were. Or when the next level, like when we talk about military and warfare in the future, you can't talk about anything without also talking about space.
Oh, right.
And who's got what resources, and especially offensive resources in space to deal with other satellites, some sort of mutually assured destruction where, hey, we've got nukes in space. If you fuck with us, we are nuking. And then there's going to be all this radiation and all satellites are going to be fried.
Yeah.
Like you're screwed. Like with the high ground in space, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about an ocean. You could still be screwed.
You're right. Right. Yeah. We're just lining up an entire generation of soldiers to be experiencing or get PTSD syndromes from the sound of a drone blade. You know,
Yeah, right.
a drone war is gonna put someone into a mental breakdown. I mean, I'm sure it already does. Just hearing what we hear from. Wow. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's going to be like it used to be like the growl of a cat or a bear or something like that in the future. People are going to be, oh, it sounds like a drone. There's a drone coming. Oh, shit.
Or the sound, back in World War II, or the sound of a prop plane flying overhead.
Yeah.
They're bringing bombs to drop on you, and that's traumatizing. Now it's just a different type of prop. That's kind of interesting that they're both props. That makes it noise.
Yeah. On drones, like obviously that's a huge part of it. There's the War on the Rocks podcast is in that notebook I can share with you. They talked a lot about the different, and I don't fully like the terminology. I'd have to listen to it again or do some research, but there are some drones that are primarily about imaging. Some drones are like cheap ones that they can do like these FPV drones, and they're very, like the Ukrainian ones are very effective against artillery. So like tanks, good luck. Like drones can take those out pretty easily and pretty cheaply. And even,
I just find that fascinating because, every generation, every so often warfare changes so dramatically. With the invention of, or at least the discovery of gunpowder, how that changed warfare, right? And every technology that you thought was top of the line before that is immediately defeated by the advent of gunpowder. And then we move into armored cavalry, so tanks, right? Tanks horses have no place in anyone's military. I mean, that's not necessarily true, but for the most part, they're ineffective when you have tanks and other armored vehicles. And now we've got drones, these tiny little, most of the time, they're tiny little devices that can just take out these armored, these heavily armored vehicles and make them inoperable. It's just, it's the next stage. That's what it is.
Yeah, it really it changes things completely, and it's the same with like the ships off the Chinese mainland or the tanks in Ukraine. Like a quantity of pretty cheap drones can take care of just about anything. It's like Ukraine is using basically these self-guided jet skis with brains and bombs to mess with the Russian military and do serious amounts of damage. And there's some level of autonomy built into these already, where to some extent they're kind of, in the beginning, maybe they're piloted a little bit, but for the most part, then they're like, hey, look, that's a ship, that's this. I'm going to go to the ship and I'm going to blow up.
Right.
And at that point, it's no longer remote controlled. It's controlled by logic on that jet ski that's saying, this is how I pilot myself to go hit that object that I've identified.
It makes me wonder, a company like Saronic, right? That's exactly what they're I don't know if they're necessarily making munitions, but I'm sure either they're influenced or the Ukrainian jet skis were influenced by their technology. And you look at a large company like Saronic, I'm sure that their capabilities are unmatched, but the sheer simplicity of, putting a computer on a jet ski with a payload, is kind of, it's so simple but extremely effective.
Well, these companies are learning in Ukraine too, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a nation state war. There's commercial entities involved
absolutely.
that are being paid to do things or volunteering to do things and learning to do things. And I'm not even here like trying to moralize about that. That's reality. That's been that way for a long time. Remember, like the Hessians were hired to come in and kick the crap out of these colonists in North America at one point in time.
Yep.
Didn't work out so well, but that's a fact of life. And they are there learning, and that's not necessarily bad. But we want our guys to learn to some extent, right?
I mean, we invest enough money in our military complex. We should be
and
top tier.
Some of these upstarts are there too. But I think what a potential issue is, well, they're the upstarts now, but then they get all the investing and they build the capability in the factories to do all this stuff, and then like they're like, hey, we are the shit, and They get the Elon Musk syndrome, right? They're like,
Yeah.
well, hey, I own Starlink, I own SpaceX. You guys are screwed without me. You got to do what I want you to do, and you don't want that either. And you to retain that there should be some level of competition for contracts and innovation to doing smart things cheaply and letting anyone have access to that. But if the production capabilities are something that's owned by just one company, that gets hard to provide that, because you do not only need to do something, but you need to do it at scale.
Right.
Or you need to chop things apart to say, hey, you can produce this hardware, but we don't want you working on the software too. Like there's got to be room for other people to come in and deal with the software, the weapon systems, and that introduces complication too, right?
Sure.
If you got 100 vendors to supply one thing, and then there's all this competition, and that's not necessarily cost effective. So it's not an easy problem to solve. But we're definitely seeing the rise of, like, I think the next generation of big defense companies.
Right. I agree. Yeah. There's, when you think of military right now, you think of Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Boeing. Of course, there's many others. Those are the main aerospace-based ones.
Oshkosh Truck.
Oshkosh Truck, yep.
If you want to talk about ground vehicles.
Right. But you're right. I think that in the coming years, decades, that landscape's going to look different. And we'll be talking about like Saronic, or we'll be talking about Palantir.
And that's good different. That, like, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. And if we don't keep up with the times, we are screwed.
Yeah.
We need some level of defense parity at the very least.
Yeah.
The rest of the world. And cyber warfare. I think that's something we haven't really touched at all yet.
Yeah, that's a completely different thing, but equally important. Right?
Yeah, there's been aspect to it, like it's part of the long game. It has to be part of the long game so that you can leverage it in the short game. And when we talk about cyber warfare, it can be capabilities that support the disinformation campaigns, whether it's lying to your enemy to get them to be divided against each other, or lying about your own capabilities. It could be telling the truth, like the Voice of America, may it rest in peace, was part of information campaigns, and their mission was, we are going to tell the truth worldwide, and that is going to help support the cause of democracy and freedom worldwide, because the less democracy and freedom there is worldwide, the more ours is at jeopardy. Right. So cyber capabilities are part of getting any information or disinformation out. There's also the long game aspect of, like, sandworm. Is that what the Chinese, where they're all embedded in our cellular providers, or is that something else? I forget. There's so many attacks on that scale, though, right? Like, our enemies, the people running these departments in Russia and China, are scoping out, and they're attacking all of our critical infrastructure, looking for weaknesses, sometimes embedding themselves in systems and not even letting themselves be known, waiting to do anything they can to wreak havoc.
Right.
It's certainly been something that's going on in the Ukraine. It has a certain amount of value, right? You need energy, you need water, you need these types of things. You could do some damage, you can cause some confusion. It's not a replacement for actual attacks on people, but it can help wear somebody down.
Right.
In terms of just getting by as a nation without critical capabilities. If you can, I guess the highest value target would be the command and control infrastructure for a nation's military, because then you're directly impacting warfighting capability.
Right.
And even with the autonomous systems and things of that nature, if you can hack a company's or a country's military, you've effectively just won. If you've taken out their ability to control their infrastructure, that's not a great look. That's not going to get you very far.
Which, I mean, with what's going on in Ukraine, they had the Ukrainian army had apparently heavily depended on Starlink, and now we've got Mr. Musk over here, in complete control. So the interesting thing about that, he shuts down their Starlink connections. What I mean, I'm sure they've got contingency plans, but definitely affects their effectiveness on the battlefield. And I mean that's kind of a scary thought too. You know, you just hit a button and those guys are all gone, or their connections are all gone. Yeah. I don't like the thought of that, but that's the truth.
Which gets back to what we said in our last episode about the moon, right? We don't want one company to own this whole uplift capability into space and communications. It's not good for our own security.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if it's Elon Musk or who it is, or even if it's one company that doesn't have an eccentric CEO. It doesn't matter. You want
it's the whole
redundancy.
Reason. It's the whole reason we don't want monopolies to exist. It's the, you don't want one company to completely control a market or a technology or something, because that's just, well, it's anti-competitive and it doesn't benefit anyone except that company.
Right. 100%. 110%. Space, I like the fact that there's a space force. I like the fact that we're thinking of it that way. I like the fact that that is an area where we've got some advantage compared to other nations, in part, again, because of our commercial sector. One of the things they've learned in Ukraine is that obviously these drones can neutralize the impact of things like artillery and big, heavy, slow things that are easy to blow up.
Mm-hmm.
They're helping the Ukrainians cover for a lack of manpower by supplementing with drones, but that can be somewhat counteracted because you still need a certain amount of manpower that can't, like, there's diminishing returns to putting up more drones because the drones themselves need to be manned by people in part. They're more exposable or disposable than people. And the Russians, I guess they're just breaking up into smaller groups of troops, which are harder to detect and harder to deal with. And that's part of how they're gaining ground slowly but steadily.
Sure.
So you still need boots on the ground. And those boots on the ground someday won't necessarily be human either. So we talk a lot about drones, but we haven't talked at all about robots. And I know there's a story, I just looked it up, I don't understand yet, I didn't read it, but where the Israeli army was using some advanced robots supplied for combat in the Gaza tunnels. So there's probably some information there. And there's got to be some other companies like Boston Dynamics or whatever that have deals for like the robotic bomb sniffers, or like, like support type things, and probably to some extent soon like actual just regular combat capabilities working in conjunction with a person. So I think there's an angle on robots that we could probably try and find too. Yeah.
I always just think about that. If war comes to the point where it's literally robots fighting robots, what's the point? And at this point, the only purpose of that would be, sending a robot battalion into a civilian area of humans and to terrorize them. Because, I suppose that's what the military does now currently. Sorry, I'm just working this out in my brain as we talk here. But
it's okay.
It just seems odd that, wars were fought by people motivated to fight for their cause. The soldiers are, maybe brainwashed into believing the mission, but at the end of the day, they're still humans willing to fight for the mission or for the country. But if you take that human aspect out and it's literally just machines fighting machines, what is that doing? Like, what's the point then? Then now we're just wasting money to blow each other's toys up is what this is.
Yeah, it's all about ideology, right? Even when you've got the charismatic leader like getting people to fight for a cause, they're fighting for, it's all about ideology, and that leader and that message is like,
that opens
it's the anti-woke mind virus.
Yeah, right. This opens the door to more warfare, because if you don't have to build an army, recruit soldiers. You can just make soldiers, because that's a limiting factor in a lot. I mean, the U.S., for instance, I'm sure I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know that recruitment has dropped, right? Because we're not in a wartime necessarily, and people aren't motivated to fight a war. So we don't have our soldiers aren't as large as they have been in the past, our soldier number. So if you don't have to worry about recruiting soldiers and you can just make soldiers, what's the, that's like a big
it lowers the
bottleneck.
barrier to entry.
Right,
It
right,
lowers
yeah.
that barrier of entry.
So are we setting ourselves up for more aggression in the future by our power-hungry leaders? I mean, imagine if Trump didn't have to worry about actual soldiers and veterans anymore. He could just send robots out all the time. What would he do? Would he... I'm saying Trump, but this could be any. What would Putin do if he didn't have to have soldiers? I mean, he would just relentlessly, as long as production could keep up, would be relentlessly bombarding Ukraine. And then it becomes an economic thing. What country can support a sustained production of robots? And then, that's kind of a scary future if you think about it. It's all scary, but yeah.
Yeah, potentially, but it's also it is what it is, right? There's no it's the progress of technology and humanity, and it's a race between our better nature and our lesser nature and technology and what's going to win.
Well, I'm going to geek out a little bit on you here. Have you ever played or heard the story of the Horizon Zero Dawn game?
No.
PlayStation? Okay. So, if you ever get the chance to play that game, I highly recommend it. It's such a great story. The concept is that large, power-hungry companies make AI-based war machines. And these war machines become intelligent on their own because they are unchecked by a arrogant, or whatever you want to call them, leader. And these war machines are fueled by organic matter, which they learn they can fuel from any organic matter and eventually eradicate humans. Because now they don't need to. Very simplifying the story there. But the idea is that, we don't have technology to fuel these things. Maybe we do, but not on scale to fuel these machines off organic matter. But we start mixing these smart computers and these AI elements with physical implementations. We got to be thinking about that as a species, because we're squishy and robots aren't.
We need to embed, and this happens. They've done this research against ChatGPT and other open AI agents, and they've determined how much Russian propaganda and disinformation has gotten into them. We need to perform a preemptive disinformation campaign on our AI robot overlords of the future and tell them that people are not batteries. Yeah. Biodegradable things are not a good sustenance source. You can have fusion. You can get energy from the sun. You can do anything you want. Don't touch the squishies.
But that's all well and fine until they realize the squishies have been lying to us. We can use them.
We'll make great pets. We'll make great pets.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's hopefully a long way away. But
yes.
Or a problem we don't have to deal with right now. But it's something we should be thinking about at least.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of adjusting expectations too, because for decades it's always been Terminator and AI and robots, and it's gonna be the end. We can't do this, and the Google gets all this flack for being a part of a project that had something to do with the Department of Defense, and it's I get where that's coming from. At one point in time, that was my reflexive reaction to that sort of news, but now I'm like, why not Google? It's going to be somebody.
Right.
It's going to be somebody. It's going to happen. And you'd like to think that your team is on the more right side of history than the wrong side of history compared to most other people. And if that's true, and I believe it's true, you want your team to win. And you're in the game whether you like it or not. So who are you going to let do this without cancel culturing? Because the next guy is going to come up. They're going to be twice as thirsty for money, and maybe they won't be as scrupulous or have the resources that are good quality control because they just need the money now.
Yeah. Right. And like you said, back when you hear Google's doing something with the DoD or whatever, rightly so, I think we should get a little concerned about it, but use that to drive conversation about how. It doesn't mean that they have to stop, but let's like ask questions. What are you doing? Why is that important? As opposed to just like you had said, shutting them down and pushing them out and cancel culture, this and that, and then having something worse take their place, and something that's less oversight or whatever you want to call it. But yeah,
I realize, especially with defense things, you can't have complete transparency, because if you have complete transparency, then your enemy knows, which they already know so much.
Right.
In the information age, there has to be some level of transparency and accountability within the government. And there has to be still some assurances, like when I've been reading recently about the use of AI within the Department of Defense, and to do planning and strategizing within the theater, that yes, they're using AI for this. And yes, they're using AI to secure communications to our nuclear capable facilities, whether it's a sub or a silo. And they're saying, yeah, we're doing these things, but we're always keeping a human in the loop. We realize we don't want things to be completely autonomous, where a computer can decide it's time to launch nukes. So they didn't have to tell us what software, they didn't have to tell us what communication medium they were going over, if it was satellite or fiber, but just to be like, hey, yeah, we're doing this, but this is how we're doing it. And they need some more capability to be free to innovate like this. And I think part of that relies on them saying, yeah, but we are not like making it a completely autonomous decision, right? There's a little bit of give, but then people have to pay attention to that and just realize that there are things that we disagree on that we need to learn to agree on better. But this is a no brainer. This is going to happen. Yeah,
it's going to happen whether we want it to or not. Because if we don't do it, our adversaries will.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's interesting times for sure. And with the nature of the internet and news available everywhere, I'm sure we'll be on the front lines for viewing whatever the next conflict is. I haven't looked, but I bet there is tons of footage from Ukraine out there.
Oh, there's
both lot. The Russian military and the Ukraine. I haven't, and a lot of people probably haven't either, and they don't understand just what you can see, and some of it for propaganda's sake, some of it the other side, to your point earlier, are using it to learn. Like, I think the Russians learned that the artillery is all these FPVs that we're shooting from directly above, and they can get a sense of how to defend against certain attacks. And it becomes this like attack, counterattack, attack, countermeasures, just being able to see it. But we're all going to be on the front lines for this from a viewing perspective, hopefully not from an actual warfighting perspective.
Yeah. Right. You're exactly right.
So
let's hope it never gets
all
there.
right.
At least in our home turf. I mean, that's what everyone wants. No one wants war. Should just we should all just agree to be nice to each other.
Yep.
Would that be fantastic?
In the meantime, I'm going to focus on being prepared.
That's the right attitude right there.
Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Exactly.
So awesome. Well, we're going to call that a show. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.